Hi guys, just before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to ask you a big favor. Assuming you like the content that I'm putting out on this channel, could you please do me a favor and press the subscribe button? It really does help reach more people. And while you're at it, if you could just smash that like button down there, we'd really appreciate it. I just want to get this channel out to as many people as possible, so more and more people are getting exposed to these kinds of stories. And I'll stop talking now and let you get into the episode. Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback podcast. Today, I am excited to actually have a fellow male on the show. It's been a while. I think people think I'm targeting women to come on the show, but that is not true. There is just a lot more women out there that are willing to speak up about chronic illness. So great to have you on, Jake. This is Jake Myers. How are you?
Great, man. So happy to be here. Thank you, Phil. Yeah, I'm stoked. This is great. Before we even started recording, I was singing a song, getting the energy up, and I'm ready to roll. Let's do it.
He was. I tried to think about start singing, but my voice doesn't allow it. So just to give you guys a bit of an introduction to Jake and his story. So Jake is a transformational coach who helps people with chronic illness regain control of their lives. He learned the hard way, like we are all doing, having dealt with chronic Lyme disease for 15 years. And he feels that if he was to have the type of guidance that he now provides, this would have changed his life. Not only has he been able to turn around his own life, he's now helped countless others balance their own lives in the face of illness and achieve their goals. So I'm super excited to speak about both sides of that. And so if we could go back before any of this stuff happened, if you can, think back to how life was like before, those 15 years that I mentioned, what was your childhood like health wise? Were you a healthy person? Now, looking back now, can you see signs of like unhealthiness?
Yeah, for sure. I love that question because a lot of people, when we do podcasts and we're talking about chronic illness journeys, we start with when we got sick. My journey started with when I failed kindergarten. This is so relevant to the chronic comeback, right? It's not like when I was 5 or 6 years old and I couldn't color in the lines, or I was super out of line, just too much energy. Turns out I was dyslexic. It's not like when I was 6, I knew that I was learning this, but now when I look back, I know when I failed kindergarten, that was the first major adversity that I came up against. Fortunately, I learned that adversity and failure can bring you down and make you feel less than, or you can learn to respond in a way where it's empowering. You can find outlets to challenge your differences. That's exactly what I did. I turned towards drumming and filmmaking and creative outlets, and like learned how to read music before I could read English. And that was the beginning of this journey of like cultivating an ability. I really do believe it is an ability to respond to challenges and to be not in control of what happens in your life, like what happens to you, but in how you respond to that. So yeah, I mean, then I got the dyslexia diagnosis. But yeah, I'll stop there. What do you think about that?
Can you they fail people in kindergarten? That's insane.
Yeah.
How is that even allowed?
Right, like you got to be really out of control. I mean, if it helps paint the picture, like I showed up every day wearing cowboy boots and underwear. That's about it. Sometimes I would just like put stickers all over my body. like
okay.
I was just. Yeah. And I mean, I was just on my own little island doing my thing,
Okay.
I don't know if they necessarily failed me, or if it was like my parents also being like, okay, let's figure out what's going on. And they like helped get the diagnosis and like wanted to help me get into a school that understood dyslexia, that was probably a big part of it. I don't think they were just straight up like, you're done.
so at the time, so this was any sort of like, I guess, symptoms you were having was more, you weren't getting like physical symptoms. It was more just with your, dyslexia and stuff like that.
Yeah. Learning differences, ADHD, that sort of stuff. Just having a lot of energy, creative energy, that no health issues from that time on. Healthy childhood. I feel incredibly fortunate to grow up in a supportive home. Until I was 15, and like 3 or 4 things happened that year. I was fortunate enough to go to India, which was amazing, but I almost died there, like from a bacterial infection, and it like fucked my gut up to the point that like I'm just now recovering from it, you know?
Wow.
And then I got back from that trip. I had lost like 30 pounds and I was like super sick, and had like a major viral flare, ended up in the hospital, and they did like a spinal tap and claimed it was viral meningitis. I know now, looking back at my records, that it showed clear evidence of Lyme disease. And my pediatrician was like, nah, that's not a thing. The other thing is that same year, I also got a concussion. Actually, yeah, before the spinal tap, I had a concussion. I fell snowboarding. And I think it's that combination. Like, plenty of people can contract Lyme disease and be fine. But as soon as your immune system gets hit, whether that's, from trauma, from physical or mental trauma, like those bugs can thrive. And so that was when I started experiencing, basically from then on, similar to your story, of, I think you said, about when you got back from Australia, just like 9 years of every doctor telling me you're fine, and just mysterious undiagnosed illness, like so many of us.
Is there something, I think I've heard this, and I'm probably butchering this like analysis, but like when you get like a trauma to your neck, there's a lot of, it can release a lot of like bacteria and infection and stuff like that, and that can be, it sounds like there was a bit of a perfect storm there. You had a couple of infections and then a trauma which actually dislodged a lot of it, then just let it run havoc in your body. Is that, would you say that's accurate?
That's exactly what happened. Yeah, perfect storm.
Yeah, God. And what were the symptoms? So 9 years, what were the symptoms, and were they getting worse as the 9 years went on? Were they every day? Yeah.
Yeah, super persistent. Like so many of us in this space who have dealt with Lyme or complex chronic infections, it's like you have the underlying like flu-like symptoms, where it's like you have the flu every day, feverish, aches, chills, hot and cold, like, and then you have the flares. And similar to yourself, like, especially because I didn't know what it was, I was just like, I'm gonna live my life.
Yeah.
Like, I've always been high energy, go-getter type A person. I went off to college and I was like living life hard. Like, I was partying, I was doing all the things and snowboarding and touring as a drummer and just like living my life, like not gonna let this happen.
Yeah.
And it was like super highs and then super lows. I would crash so hard. I remember freshman year of college, my mom calling my roommate and asking him to take me to the hospital. And like, it culminated kind of like, there were various different symptoms and things that came up, but the worst of it was like sophomore year of college. I spent like probably 2 months of just excruciating back pain, like unable to get out of bed, and everyone telling me it was fine. And then one of those times that I went to the hospital, my white blood cell count was just like through the roof, and they like rushed me home and did all these tests and found like an abscess filled with MRSA on my kidney. And I was like about to die from this. Like, it was so gnarly. And even after that, it was just like, you're fine. After that, I think it was another 2 or 3 years until, not even until I saw a Lyme doc, but until I saw any practitioner that said, hey, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but there's something wrong with you. Like, your immune system is compromised and you have complex chronic infections. We're going to figure it out. That wasn't until 2014, I think.
And this first started kicking off, did you say 10 years before or 9 years before?
Yeah, it took 9 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To 2005. Yeah, 2005, is that right?
2005 to 2014 is basically what it was. 2014, when like that doctor was the first one to acknowledge it. 15 was the year that I saw an ILADS doctor, a Lyme certified doctor, who ran the proper tests and diagnosed me and put me on a treatment plan.
So what did it feel like when you finally got that diagnosis? Because we talk about a lot about on this podcast about, there's like this initial just like, yes, someone gets me, like, this is validation. And then it's like, oh fuck, I've got Lyme disease. I need to like figure out what the hell this is. Have I got this forever? And then you're on another spiral of thoughts.
Well, this is exactly what we were talking about earlier. Like, this is why at that moment, I wish I could talk to myself now. I wish I had a podcast that you're creating now. I wish I could talk to you or anyone on this podcast, because it's just something that, like, it's not like when you're sitting in that doctor's office and they have maybe an hour or hour and a half, if you're lucky, to meet with you, where they're going to walk you through all the emotional and mindset pieces of what does it mean for your identity and your sense of worth and well-being, and your life moving forward. It's exciting, and it's a relief. I will tell you, I'll never forget the moment. This was before I got a diagnosis, that I think my mom was able to figure it out first just by like researching so much. And I never forget, she called me and she was like in tears one day and she was like, I figured it out. I was like, what? She's like, you have Lyme disease. I had no idea what that was. I was like, okay, went about my business, you know? So it's like, for those of us that have never been in this world, when you get that diagnosis, sometimes it's a relief because it's validation. But I also want to say this real quick. I was on a live yesterday talking about some myths in chronic illness, one of them being like the mystery case where you don't get a diagnosis, or even when you get a diagnosis, what it means for you. And I just want anybody who's listening to this to know, like, whether you have a diagnosis or not, your experiences are valid.
Yeah.
And don't let anybody else define that for you. You're the only one that can define that. And if you're not getting support or validation, then come to a place like that Phil is creating, come to these spaces where people get you and can back you, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's super important. Like, I had someone on the show, I recorded an episode yesterday, and she had something stupid like 30 diagnoses of different things. And she got better when she actually just put all that to one side and actually just treated the fact that she just wasn't functioning. Why wasn't she functioning? It wasn't because a specific diagnosis, it was because of a systemic like issue. So, okay, you get the diagnosis, you're like, wow, my life's just changed in a big way. What was the next step for you? Was he because there's a lot of Lyme literate doctors that can go one way and then you can go the other way, and
Yeah.
which way did you go? Was it like antibiotics or that kind of stuff? Or
Yeah, I mean, I had already done a year of doxycycline and been through that whole phase that I think you've probably been through, so many of us, where like you get better from the doxy or from an antibiotic, but then you get significantly worse and there's lots of side effects and you can't detox and it wreaks havoc on your body, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. In 2015, when I got the diagnosis, I entered a phase where, first of all, I was working my dream job as an experiential event manager. And I was also like managing bands and touring as a drummer, like I said, like living my best life. And I get this diagnosis and I'm just like, all right, I got this. Now, I didn't tell anybody, like my employer. I told my closest circle, you know, my family and 2 or 3 friends, but I didn't tell anybody, especially because of all the years of lacking the validation, of the invisibleness. I look so high energy and excited. Like, how could I possibly say? But I went on this phase for about 2 years where I was like mind over matter, right? It was like, yes, I feel like shit, but I'm gonna do what I will. I'm gonna like live my life. She's a great Lyme doc and put me on a very smart protocol where I was like kind of pulsing antibiotics and herbs with IVs and detoxing. Number one thing I did during that time was I got an infrared heat like 5 or 6 times a week. I found a yoga studio that had infrared heat panels. And this is like way before I get into my wellness journey, and I didn't do yoga at the time or anything, right? But even if I just went in that room and laid there for 30 minutes, like that was instrumental in just killing a ton of pathogens and bugs. But I went through this phase where I was like, I feel like shit, but I'm still going to go play this show this weekend. And I'm going to still do this. Similar to before the diagnosis, great highs. And I always have had the ability to push through. Like many of us, I think it's actually easier to ignore the symptoms and to just push through.
Yeah.
But then when I would let my guard down and, you know, chill out on a Sunday, especially because I hated rest, but if I went to go do it, like, boom, floodgates come down and it just all hit me at like such a low crash that I couldn't do anything. That was kind of what happened for 2 years. Part of that, I moved to Portland, Oregon as a stepping stone to get to LA. And it was there that the mold toxicity hit, which was very common for so many of us in this space. And, you know, we talked briefly about it, but that's for me when the neurological symptoms hit a new level. Like I had never experienced anxiety, brain fog, and depression on that level. It was just crippling. And I hit rock bottom to the point where I had to tell my employer for the first time and was like, usually I could handle this, but right now it's got the best of me. And, you know, I need to get out of this environment. I need to go back to Maryland. I need to be around my doctors in order to do my work. Can you support that? Fortunately, they did. That led to this next phase. First, I had to recover from the mold and get back on my feet. Then I moved to LA, similar to how you mentioned moving to Bali, because I thought it was like the greatest opportunity for me to heal. Like I'm in the sun, there's fresh produce, there's good practitioners, people are health conscious, and I tried to pursue career and healing, and both of them suffered. And I entered a phase of my life where for the first time, I put everything on hold and was just like, I'm going to commit 110% to healing. I don't care what I have to do financially or whatever it means. Like, I'm going to focus on healing. And similar to your journey into mindfulness, like it was 2 years where like I had to learn to view rest as success. Like, cause I'm a go-getter who doesn't like rest, right? So I had to learn how to be alone, but not lonely. Like I had to learn these sort of things, how to sit with myself and be mindful. And I also had to learn how to advocate for my needs and which practitioners to work with and how to implement protocols and sustain healing. And I just kind of like went on this journey of learning all of this stuff by myself. And I also was fortunate enough to do just about every Lyme treatment you could imagine. Now, many people, especially who don't have financial means, look at that and are like, man, if only I could do, this treatment, I could get well. But the reality of that journey was that like some of the things that I didn't do shit.
Yeah.
Some of the things, one or two of them in particular, were actually instrumental in my healing, right? And I wouldn't be here today. But then a lot of them were detrimental.
Yeah.
In particular, IV antibiotics with a PICC line to the point after that, and it was targeting a parasite. We wanted to kill the parasite. It killed me. Like I couldn't walk for almost a year after that. So it was like this 2-year period of like learning all this stuff myself until eventually, and throughout that period, I eventually like came out with my struggle and I started sharing it. And similar to yourself and everybody in this space, like the more that you open up and share this stuff, the more you realize you're not alone. And I also started to realize that my specific mindset on it and the way that I had approached it, tying it back to kindergarten, that ability to respond to a challenge in a certain way is an ability. And I realized it was really inspiring people. And then cut to like, when I finally felt in control of my life and healing in a balanced state and like ready to work again in the traditional sense, I trained as a transformational coach because I was like, I have to help people do this. And I learned how to work with people in a way that's not just like inspiring them, but transforming their lives over the long run and helping them. Like, I'm never here to tell you what to do. I'm here to guide you to figure out what's right for you. You know what I mean?
So dialing it back a little bit, like,
sorry, I just rushed.
No. That's what happens. We go through the story there and like we unpick it. And going back into what first made you have that like switch of I need to start thinking about things in a different way? Was it a gradual thing? You were exposed to certain ways of thinking and then you started to think, or was it just one day you read something and it just caused you to change your mind?
No, I think it was gradual. And even like tying back to before I got sick, like as I learned about all this, I realized that I had been cultivating this for a long time because, for instance, when I failed kindergarten and I started playing drums were so important. And one of the number one things I recommend is just like having an outlet. And maybe for you, it was like playing sports, but like something that's physical and mental in nature where you get in a flow state, like you're just like present. That's mindfulness. I didn't know it at the time. I just love playing drums because it's like, I don't think about anything and I could just exist and feel myself. But so it's been a very long journey, and I don't think for anybody it's like it happens like that. But I will say through my training and then through my work, it's astonishing that like sometimes 2 or maybe even 3 calls in with a client, like they will have a life-changing like just transformation and it's just cool to know that like, yeah, maybe it doesn't happen right away, but there are things that we can do that can really shift this sort of stuff on a deep level.
So what was it for you that made the real shift in your health compared to, because you said you got back to full-time like work and obviously now you're a coach yourself. What was it that helped you made that switch? Was it more of a physical thing you were doing? Was it a mindset thing? Was it a combination?
Okay. Yeah, it was a combination, right? I love this question, especially for those people that like followed me before I got into coaching. And then suddenly I'm like doing so well and I'm doing coach, like what happened? Like, how did you get, people are skeptical.
what were you doing? Sorry, because I wasn't following you at that point. Were you documenting your like recovery, and then people have actually seen that process?
Yeah, I was just like super open and was creating a community and a space on Instagram where I was just like sharing and bringing people together and just complete transparency and honesty. And like I said, because I was fortunate enough to be trying all these different treatments, and like I was able to go to Germany and Switzerland, and have access to all this incredible care. I was documenting the whole thing. Yeah, for sure. I was on.
Cool, got you.
And that was like cool and it was inspiring. But at the same time, like I was not where I'm at now. And you ask what the big change is. Okay, number one is me taking control of my healing. No one else. Like I was working with amazing practitioners and healers and advocates, and like, but I was relying on them to make the decisions about my healing and where I should go on my journey. And it wasn't until I realized, no. I know my body best. I am in charge. Everyone else here is guiding and providing information to empower me, but like I call the shots. And that is such a powerful transformation that bleeds over into not just your healing, but your whole life. Like the more accountability you could take for your life, the more you can create the life you want, regardless of your circumstances. So that was a huge transition. Another one, which I heard you talking about on one of your solo episodes, about believing in healing. Like I was sitting there for like 2 years journaling, I could be well. And I was meditating and I was doing all of the things. And so many people who come to me are like doing all those things and affirmations and working with therapists, all this stuff, but like not making that jump. And it's because even though I was writing it and saying it, my body, my mind didn't truly believe I was capable of healing. Once I switched that belief and was able to like really embody that, a lot changed. The third thing is purpose, which you talked about, right? Like the struggle, turning my struggle into an opportunity to serve people, having a purpose that's greater than myself. If your purpose is to get well in order to do X, Y, Z, your mind is set on continuing to struggle. If you change your purpose just to help people, right? Like, and you stop focusing about the constant struggle and fight. Like I was just fighting against it. I was constantly fighting, and I like stopped fighting and I just surrendered, not gave up, big difference, right? But I surrendered and was like, instilled a greater purpose that makes you get up every day and have a reason to feel good.
Yeah. So how going back to the belief thing, because I think that's an important thing, still something that I'm definitely working with, and it's getting better, is I can believe on an intellectual level that I will recover, because I'm adding to my belief for every single one of these episodes I do. However, there can still be a deep down annoying little voice in my head saying, it won't be you. There's something different about you. There's something special about you. What did you do to make that switch in that belief? Because I just think belief is so undervalued and so important.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And I heard you talking about as well, the fact that it needs to be body and mind, right? Like, because you could do all the treatments in the world, but if you don't believe you're going to get well, it's not going to happen. But at the same time, we could sit here and talk about belief all day, but we also have to be real. Like there might be some physical roadblocks that need to be addressed. So it was both for me. Like, but in terms of belief, getting into action, right? It's one thing to sit here and you and I to talk about belief and mindset. Is another thing to do something, right? Like, and separating yourself from your thoughts in order to take inspired action. You know what I mean? Because like almost every day, I would wake up and sometimes still wake up and I would feel like I would think or feel, I feel like shit. Like I feel sick, but then I would be able to separate myself from those feelings, say, okay, I feel like shit. That doesn't mean I'm worthless and not capable of taking action today to work towards my dreams.
Yeah.
And just taking consistent action every day. What can I do right now to work towards the life that I want, towards a version of me that is embracing healing?
And when did you start to see dialing it back a bit, so it was 2015, 2014, you got the diagnosis, you had a couple of years of feeling really bad. What period of time did you start to actually feel a lot better in your physical self?
Yeah, 2015, I got the diagnosis. 16, 17, 18 was like that mind over matter phase, right? 18, 19 was the 2 years of like my personal journey and trying all the treatments. At the beginning of quarantine, so March 2020, basically, or is that 19 actually?
Yeah.
Or
No, it's 2020.
who knows now?
2020. Yeah. It's been going on for too long, man. But yeah, it's 2020 because
Yeah.
it's almost 2 years now.
Yeah. Well, so basically what happened was like, I finally got to go to Germany and Switzerland, and I've been waiting to go to this clinic that for years, like everybody was telling me.
Which one is it? Sorry, by the way, I think I know the one you're talking about. It's not the one where you go in? Is it the one where you go into like a thing and it's like a tap? Yeah, what can you tell what it can you tell what it is?
I was lucky enough to go to Swiss Biohealth for the dental piece.
Oh, okay. No,
Germany.
not what I thought it was.
I did apheresis in Germany, and then I went to Switzerland to a clinic called Alpstein, and this was the one that like everybody told me like I knew multiple people with Lyme who had come back from this and like had suddenly improved their lives, and they were like, "This is going to be it for you." Long story short, like the second day I was there, after like the onboarding day, the first day of treatments was the day that Trump announced the travel ban, and we made the decision to do 1 day of treatments and then fly home. And it was freaking insane to do that because I put my body in shock, first of all. Like I did the if what you were talking about is hyper, not like the heat table, basically.
Yeah. It's trying to kill everything. And is it kind of like I swear someone said it's like a form of like almost like chemotherapy, but not quite that extreme.
Yeah. And I did that and then flew home the next day. And anyway, so what happened during that next phase, like I think that was a blessing in disguise, because it basically, because of that, not being able to finish that, because of quarantine, not being able to leave the house for treatments or anything, like I entered a phase where I couldn't be doing treatments. And that was one of the first times where I like really slowed down, and that began that transition of me realizing like, wow, I haven't been in control of my healing. Like I really need to listen to my body. That those next 6 months were probably another kind of rock bottom. And I just moved in with my now fiance, and like the brain fog was like so bad that like I couldn't communicate with her at all. And it was like really difficult to navigate for both of us, but also cemented our relationship. So there were 6 months there where it was another low point. Then I would say, so that was March to June. And then I would say June until now, or well, that June to August. Yeah, honestly, it was like a 2-month experience. Once I started like taking control of my healing, it was like 2 months that I turned it around and reached a point where I was like, wanted to work again. Like up until then, I was never bored of the work of healing. But then I was like, that August, I guess it was 2019 or 20, I was like getting antsy. And that's when I trained. And then I launched my business October 2020. So it's been about a year since I've been doing coaching and on this journey. And like throughout this whole past year and a half, I've been able to sustain this level of functionality and healing that I have never experienced prior in my life.
Wow. So have you been kind of on it obviously healing's never linear, right? You're not just going like that, but have you been in generally just as the months go by, your health has just been getting better and better?
It was like, it went from like rock bottom to like a high it had never reached. And then it's kind of like leveled off since then. And I thought about drawing a chart recently, actually. It's kind of been like just a slow, like I've never experienced this level of functionality, and it's just continued with slight improvements, especially from a physical standpoint. Like now that I'm able to walk multiple times a day and do exercise and do these sort of things that I never have been able to do since the low point. But I'm really happy. It's an interesting time that we're talking, because I know right now that I'm entering an uphill.
Yeah.
We moved to Austin a couple months ago, and like I got a new doctor here, which honestly, after years of literally traveling the world and seeing the top practitioners, I come to Texas. I have an appointment with her. On the first appointment, she says to me, yeah, listen, like, you know your body best. You're in charge. I'm here to give you information to help you make this. I was like, oh, like after traveling the world, I hadn't really even heard that from that many practitioners. So I had to like stop her and be like, this is amazing. And now that we're working together and I'm like getting back on finding ways to improve my healing, I know that it's about to reach a new high.
And what are the main things you're doing? Like what are the main things you've been doing? You said you've taken control over things. Have you been a lot of like detoxing, like physically, but also a lot of like mental work as well? Like what do you do on a daily, weekly basis?
Yeah. That process of me taking control from like a physical or a treatment or a detox standpoint was really pulling back from a lot of that.
Okay.
Like I was detoxing and doing intense treatments, and it was really stepping back from a lot of that and really going with the less is more mindset, and then making small gradual changes that, to continue that process. Things that I do every day, like every day I wake up and I open my notebook and I just let my thoughts out of my head. And I let all the negative ones out. And then I practice just kind of like slowly transforming some of those into, some more abundance-based thoughts. Every single day I stretch. And I remember when I started that years ago, when I was at that low point, I couldn't even, like, sitting on the ground in child's pose was like rough. And I've just been very strategic about like, just do a little bit, okay. Eventually I hit a downward dog, and eventually I was able to do 1 push-up and then 2 push-ups. And so every single day I stretch, I walk, journal. Now I'm having some brain fog. And then like the purpose part, like I'm doing something that's not focused on myself, that's focused on other people and helping them. And like that really does help you feel a lot better.
Yeah. Do you have to stick to a particular diet or supplements or any of that?
My diet has been like really, really clean for like a long time. And it took a long time to understand that, how that comes into play, but like all organic, mainly just proteins. And the key thing about that was like, I had to figure out what was right for me. Once again, like plenty of people will tell you the right diet, but like not if it doesn't work for me. So for me to cut out like potatoes or protein was not working, and I wasn't sustaining my energy. And I've reached that place where I know what works for me. And fortunately, like in these past year and a half, 2 years, like I've also been able to basically like eat whatever I want and be okay. It sounds like crazy, but yeah, for me, that's worked. It's fine.
Have you, I think I always underestimated how much of an impact just focusing on the things that we stop doing, right? Like sleep, like actually getting good sleep, focusing on reducing stress, and, doing something on a daily basis that actually gets us energized. It sounds like you're definitely doing a lot of that. Is sleep something that you take a lot of care of?
Yeah, for sure. Sleep is huge. And it's one of the many reasons why I ended up becoming an entrepreneur and launching my own business, is because I could create my schedule in a way that prioritizes my healing. I don't do anything before 12 o'clock. That's not self-care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the best part about this space too is like my clients get it. And I'm trying to instill that in my clients as well. Like, you need to prioritize your healing. Real quick though, back to your point of like doing things every day. I have like a system that I created. And also this ties back to like what created a major change. If you look at like a pyramid where you have like skills and tools at the top, and then you have systems, and then you have mindset and intention, right? Like the things at the top, skills and tools, those are constantly changing and they're easy to learn. Like, a tool would be my phone, and a skill would be like communication. A system is where major change and transformation lies, but at the foundation is mindset, right? And systems help bring mindset to life. So regardless of how great of systems you get from a coach or a therapist or whatever, if your mindset is shit, like you're just going to be bringing shitty thoughts to light, right? Yeah. So it starts with your mindset, of having a solid mindset. But what creates the change is having systems that help you take that consistent action to bring that mindset into your life. So one of the systems that I really lean on every single day, and my clients love, is called the daily dose. And it's like, you could do it in less than 2 minutes. And it involves like just hitting on your fears and gratitude, not just in a way where you list them down, but more feeling focused. And then the 2 things that I want to mention that are really important is visualizing the future of the person you want to become, of your healing. And then writing affirmations, not I am strong, I am capable. Those are great, but writing them as if they've already happened, right? Like it feels blank now that I have blank. That's the structure. So it feels so good and purposeful now that I have reached a point in my healing where I could serve others. That's an example of one. And when you do that every day, that helps you pull you out of it. And then another key part of the daily dose is something I call the happiness habit, which is before you get into your day, take a moment and just do something, anything that brings you a moment of joy. And when I was at my lowest points, it was so bad that like I would have to like like I would have to like fake laugh. But that worked, you know? And now I like dance around or listen to music or play drums or
Yeah.
but yes, every single day doing that sort of stuff is really powerful.
I think starting your day at 12 p.m. is like an amazing gift to yourself. Like I'm a big reason of me wanting to go to Bali is obviously the fact that it's an amazing place, but because I would be 8 hours ahead of the UK. So I'm at 2 p.m. people are still in bed. So it's like there's only a limited window of opportunity for people to actually speak to me. So you can easily start. So my goal then is to start my day at like midday as well. And then also I think that, I don't know, I hope this is what's going to happen. Like it's going to make me super productive in the time that I do work, but I just work a lot less, but I'm working more intensely when I work. Is that what you find with yourself? Like you're like on it when you're on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Wait, okay. Just curious, like with the affirmation piece, like have you sat and visualized like waking up in Bali and doing that?
Well, yeah, I think about it all the time. I don't. It's not a consistent. If you're saying, is it a consistent practice of me doing that? No, but I definitely. I've thought about it for so long. Bali's been on my radar pretty much before that, because I was there when the pandemic hit. Similar to you were actually in Europe. I was in Bali, and then I was going to stay there for a little bit longer. And then it was like it was that time when no one knew what was going to happen. I was like, do I want to be stuck in Bali? Who knows what the hell's going to happen? And my brother actually lives there, and he stayed there, and he's just in an amazing place. So ever since being there, I wanted to go back there.
Very cool. Yeah. I would encourage you to try that. Go beyond visualizing and to do those affirmations where you state like the feelings associated with already being there.
Yeah. I will. Cool. I'm going to add that to my daily thing. I'll let you know how I get on.
Yeah, let me know.
So looking back at your like story now, which actually, no, another question for you. I like speaking to people like you in the sense that you're still in your journey. You're still wanting to get more, you're not saying I've healed and this is all I want now. You're actually, it sounds to me like maybe you've got a goal of having another level of health and you want to feel that extra level of health, which is exactly what I want. Right. Is that what you're getting at? You just want to keep experiencing new levels of health?
It's just like really interesting timing that we're talking or asking that question, because if you had asked me like a couple of weeks ago, I would have just been like, I'm just so grateful to be here now, and like, this is so great. And I'm so fulfilled. And literally, I feel like every single day is like the best day of my life. And I tell my fiance that and how grateful I am for her, it's like, so I wasn't in a place where I personally in my journey was imagining that next level, but hey, I got to practice what I preach. Right. And so, I am 100% now that I've had this appointment with this doctor and we've unlocked some really basic stuff, like kind of what you were saying about instead of looking at 30 diagnosis, let's look at a systemic level. Like I finally figured out a key piece to why I haven't been able to detox. And so now I'm like, oh man, if I could actually detox efficiently, like I can't even imagine where I could be, like this is where I've been at without being able to detox,
Yeah.
So, but I mean, you and I both know, man, this is a journey. The healing is such a journey, and if you're sitting here and you're saying I'm healed, and I can help you do the same, I don't think that's very authentic or believable,
Yeah. Okay, cool. And I guess, so looking back on your story now and the position you're in now and where you could have been had you not got sick, like how different your lives would be. Like, how different is your life now? And like, are there ways in which you're grateful now for what you've been through? And yeah, could you give us a little bit of detail on that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and sometimes even recently, a little bit ago, I will break down, man, just thinking about how much suffering I've endured.
Mm,
It's just devastating,
mm,
and it's really fucking sad, and I'll break down, and that's totally okay. But I've turned all that suffering, I've turned all that pain into purpose, and it just makes it all worth it every single day.
mm. The trajectory of your life now compared to what it would have been, given what you've been through, is just insane, right? I mean,
Insane. I mean,
yeah, you go.
well, I just think adversity, especially chronic illness, just builds such deep empathy, and we just like feel for people on such a deep level. Like the fact we get on here, we've never talked before this episode, and like the fact that we're able to have these conversations, right? Or that if you talk to anybody in this chronic illness space, like who've never met, like you could have a really deep, meaningful conversation. It
Yeah.
changes, and to this point, I think many people have never experienced anything like this until the pandemic hit, and suddenly you can't just go and do what you want. You have to stay at home. You got to do what you need. And you
Yeah.
have to sit with yourself. And you can't do all the distractions. So all of a sudden you're sitting with yourself and you're thinking, oh shit, that wasn't really making me that happy. This wasn't really that fulfilling. Like, what really makes life worth it and makes it purposeful? We've had to deal with that with chronic illness. Now, a lot of people are in that space, right? But if we hadn't gone through adversity and chronic illness, like the way that we look at life and gratitude and purpose, and like, there was a point where I was at my most miserable, and I was also feeling the most gratitude I've ever experienced. And I think that says it all, right? Because like just to be able to walk one block and then sit and have a matcha was like the best thing ever, because I was at such a low point then.
Mm.
And so to go from there to where I'm at now, where every single day I'm like filled with gratitude, is just amazing.
What would be your advice to someone listening to this who's going through their lowest time at the moment, and we talked earlier about belief and belief in your own recovery. At the moment, they just don't believe in their own recovery. They don't think it's possible for them. What would be your advice to them right now?
Number one, you got to know you're not alone, and that it's okay to have help, and to find the type of help. Like, it doesn't have to be me, right? But to find the type of help who is not telling you what to do, but is helping you figure it out and put you in the driver's seat.
Mm.
That's really important. And then like the visualization piece, and this might be really hard if you're like at a major low point like I was, and you truly just like don't believe you'll ever be well. But at the end of the day, like I'm just being straight up, like if you can't even imagine it or visualize it or start thinking about it, it's never going to happen.
Mm.
So, and you could start small. And what I do with potential clients, like we hop on our first call, whether we work together or not, the whole purpose of that call is like, yeah, let's talk about where you're at now, but let's explore where you want to be. And I break that ideal life, or I created a worth model, and the W stands for your way to wellness. That picture, that W, has to not be just be health. I encourage people to break it down into 5 or so categories. Like, think about your ideal life. Yes, in terms of health and a treatment standpoint, but like, what about personal relationships? What about career? What about finances? What about community and personal growth? And start just thinking about each of those phases. And especially if you don't worry about believing whether you could get well or not, just start painting the picture. What would it feel like to wake up tomorrow and be able to do some physical activity? Would that be you going on a gentle walk? And through these conversations, the goal is to get some specificity out of there. So instead of just like going on a walk, what about like 2 walks a week for the next 3 weeks, and you paint that picture, and then you uncover, well, what's keeping me from getting there?
Yeah.
And that call right there, like that's so important, because once again, whether it's me or not, you have to be able to identify like, hey, this is where I want to be, and this is what's stopping me. And then you got to figure out a way to make that jump.
Definitely. I think that's such powerful advice for someone to hear. And I like the fact that you've talked a lot about like ownership of I'm pretty guilty of that, like giving control over to someone else and just hoping that they were going to be able to solve it. But I think taking a level of ownership is just, super important. If people want to connect with you, ask you any questions about the day, potentially work with you, like how would they best do that?
At Jake Mayers Coaching or jakeMayersCoaching.com. Yeah, you are not alone. There's no wrong way to do this. Just reach out. Even if you just want to say, I'm struggling, or whatever it is, reach out, let me know. And I'd love to talk. I just released a free download of one of like my go-to systems or tools for helping me like manage my energy, feel more in control of my energy, not feel guilty about like prioritizing my needs. It's called the box exercise. And I just released that, my first like kind of like free resource to people, just because it's been so helpful. And I'm like, take it, man, if this helps you. So, anybody could go download that now on my Instagram. Awesome. But wait, before we conclude, I mean, I know we're tight on time, we're wrapping up, but we don't have the opportunity to talk to other guys in chronic illness yet. So I just want to hear like from you, like how, like in particular, being a male throughout this journey has affected your own journey, or how it changes how people see you or treat you. That's
a great question. And thank you for becoming the podcast host
I mean, we're here, man. I just want to know.
I think it's a great question. I think it's really difficult being a man and going through this. Obviously, I know it's difficult being a woman and going through this as well. But you have to go through a real level of vulnerability, and I'm not a traditionally emotional guy. I haven't come from that like environment where everyone tells each other what they're feeling and what they're going through. So a lot of what I've had to go through is just like what you said, pushing myself through it, just pulling, chin up, get on with it, and feeling like that. And I do think there is a good part of that, and it has helped me get through a lot. But it does feel, you do feel like you are one of the only guys going through it in the world, because there aren't a lot of people like yourself, like me, who speak up about it from a male point of view. And so it does kind of feel a little bit isolating in a while. But that's why I like the fact that there are people like me and you now. Maybe it's going to make other guys feel okay and come forward and talk about it more. How about you? Like, how do you feel like having been a man going through this?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, but I got to hit on the vulnerability piece, because you haven't traditionally been like that. Like the fact that you're sitting here and we're sharing our stories and you're doing this podcast, you've clearly reached a point of being able to be vulnerable. What do you think like got you to that point?
That's a good question. The mindset work. Like I've been to like a lot of like retreats and a lot of workshops where on like the first day or so, people are in tears because they're telling you about stuff that's happened in their life. And I'm like, fuck, I'm telling people stuff that like I haven't told like my best friends. And and so once you start doing that, it becomes a little bit easier. And what I realized, I was raised in like an environment where you got made fun of if you told people what was really going on. And so I think it took for me doing a lot of this work to undo a lot of that previous belief. And when I launched this podcast, I actually put a thing up on my Facebook, like a video explaining that I'd had this chronic health issue and this is what I was doing. And there's people on my Facebook who I haven't spoken to in like 10, 15 years, who then had to see, I basically had to let them know that my life isn't what they might think it might be on social media, which is quite like a hard thing to do, because you want people to think that everything's okay. And I had to let them know that it wasn't okay. And I found that really difficult. And I found it made me feel a bit broken. But at the same time, the response I got was amazing. And there wasn't one person who was saying anything negative. And now I just feel great about it.
Yeah, that's that transition right there. And I think there's definitely people who listen to the podcast who haven't made that transition yet. The one thing I want to say about vulnerability is that, like, I don't know, for me at least, if it gets easier. I just think we get better at dealing with discomfort. Like vulnerability, like sitting here telling you this, or anytime I go in Clubhouse and share, or anytime, it's like I still get a knot in my stomach. It's still uncomfortable to talk about this stuff. But also want to encourage people to realize, like, you and I, everybody who's battling chronic illness, we live in discomfort like every day. We get pretty damn good at dealing with it. It's just a matter of like applying it to other things in our life. So you've been able to apply that to sharing and vulnerability. So have I. And it's like really cool what comes of that. Yeah. And I've had a very similar thing where it's like, I hid it for so long and then I shared. And yeah, I think for me though, one of the main differences in terms of just being a guy in the space was practitioners looking at me and just thinking that I could handle larger doses. Like, it's just a very specific thing. I mean, have you experienced that?
The thing is, I actually am a bit of a weird. I'm not very. I can tend to take larger doses, but I get what you mean. I think it's more that whenever I've been to a clinic and stuff like that, and this might be me not. This might be something that's not actually a real thing, and it's something I'm thinking. I feel like the women I've been with have maybe been treated more. They've had a little bit more care because they just thought that because I'm a guy, I can deal with it and I can get on with it. And that I guess that's the main difference for me.
Yeah.
But not a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. No, it's good to be able to talk about this stuff. And I hope that if there is any guys listening, like dealing with this, that this gives you a little bit of hope to, reach out to one of us or somebody else, or start sharing your story and know like you're not alone in this. And, I hope, man, I'm really grateful that we're here connecting, and I'm down to do whatever I can to help you and the podcast grow and continue to create more spaces like this, for sure.
No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you flipping that, because I think it's a really, really important thing to talk about. And again, that's not to, the women in this space have made the space that it is, right? I think if they hadn't spoken up and doing what they're doing, then me and you wouldn't be doing this. So they are actually, so important, and a big reason why we're able to do this. I just think that maybe men are underrepresented in this community, and maybe if we did speak up more, it would make it easier for them.
Yeah.
Cool.
Agreed.
Man. Cool. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story. I'm super excited to get this one out in particular. And I'm glad, I'm excited to see the response.
Yeah, same. Thanks, Phil. I appreciate it. Let's definitely stay in touch, man, and see what we can do to help each other out.